pyramid. Madonna is wearing the Illuminati pyramid on her background with Novus Ordo Secloro underneath it. Camel Corporation, that logo will often, in many of the billboards, you'll see a frond or a pool cue or some other interference near the word M. It'll cut the word M off so that the word M is actually divided into two words that look like, two letters that look like R and N. So instead of seeing camel, you'll be seeing carnal. It's often a device that they use. Time Warner used the eye, the old eye of Egypt. It's even made to look like the Egyptian Udjat or the sacred eye. Courtney Pine, in A Vision's Tale, is using the Illuminati pyramid with the eye at the top. Art Bell on radio, of all the symbols that could be used, it's the ocean and the pyramid with the sun at the top. Who runs kindercare, daycare for children, kindercare? We might indeed ask, well, maybe we don't need to ask. Maybe we only look as far as the logo, the Illuminati pyramid, no less. An interesting tie-in there for those who are wondering about the missing children problem in our world and abducted children and all sorts of other crimes against children. Who's running the daycare centers? Here on the bank, which is actually called Kron or Kroon, the Swedish bank, you see the Illuminati column, the Masonic column, and the Illuminati eye with the light, because the banks are controlled by the secret societies. And there's so much Egyptian symbolism. Just the study of Egyptian symbolism in corporate media alone is a whole subject in itself. Far too complex to go into here. On star, for instance, is on, the light, and star is obviously the star. So on star relates to the sun. We talked about the pyramid as being a prime symbol. Another one of the most important symbols, especially to Freemason, is what is known as the double cube. In lots of Freemasonic temples, you'll go in, you'll see a double cube. It's their altar, where there's one cube upon another cube. It's called the double ashlar, or the double cube. And we see this motif a lot of the cube, both the single and the double cube in Freemasonry. In Gateway, they dropped the 3 6s and picked up the black and white cube. And we've already seen that black and white is the symbol of the Freemasons that the police use on their hats. In TriStar and Columbia Pictures, we also see the double cube. They put them side by side in 2 squares. Inktomi, the double cube. In Mercury Car Company, the logo on the right there has the 3 striations, but if you turn it to the side, you'll see that those are triple cube, the 3 degrees of Freemasonry. The chevron symbol, which looks like 2 chevrons, is in fact a double cube. A red cube on the bottom and a blue cube set on top. If you look at that in a 3-dimensional way, you'll see that it's the double cube of Freemasonry, and it's even blue and red, representing the red and blue degrees of Freemasonry. Now, Jordan Maxwell, who's studied this all his life, actually used to write letters off to these corporations and saying, "Dear such and such, I look at your logo and I find that this is a symbol from Freemasonry, or this is a symbol from the Grand Order of the Knights of Malta, or this is a Rosicrucian symbol. Do you have any comment?" And he had letters sent back saying, "Dear sir, thank you for your letter. Absolutely, you're right. These are secret society symbols. So try it yourself and you'll find out that this is hidden in plain sight, that the organizations are not secret in the sense that we don't know about them, but what they do behind closed doors, that's the problem." Often you'll see on the floor of beautiful buildings the double cube, one cube or one square and another square interlaced with it. Those are the forces of order and disorder. When you see the square that's like that, that's the sign for order in occultism. And when you see the one that's overlaced like that, that's the sign of disorder. So government buildings will often use that motif because they're keeping order and disorder very close to them. As we talked earlier on about the 3 degrees of Freemasonry and how 3 plays a big role in our society, well, so it is that you have private, corporal, and captain, or private, corporal, and sergeant. The 3 stripes are nothing but the double cube again. If you think in your mind of those as being 3-dimensional, you'll understand now who officiates behind the military. The double cube. Here, Dell Corporation are using the double cube. Dean Witter also use it. E on its side is a very important motif we're going to come to, but just at the top left there you can see that on its side is the double cube of Freemasonry overlooking the world. So that logo comes from somewhere, and that logo means something. Here you have Enoise.com, the double cube and the globe. Here you have Yves Saint Laurent and the double cube. Here you have Dodge Chrysler, the double cube, and it's red and blue. Another one of the most powerful and most widely used symbols, very sacred to Freemasons and secret societies, is what they call the red square or the red carpet. In the Vatican, St. Peter's chair sits on a red carpet. The Queen of England is always coronated and sits on the red carpet. We have the Kremlin, and we have the red square. Over with the communists talking about the red square. And we have cutting the red tape or the red ribbon, walking on the red carpet. There's lots of terminology that we have in our society we never pay attention to because we're in a world of words and language. Well, the red square has been used by innumerable corporations, sometimes by accident, of course, just as a design, but when it's on corporations as powerful as Wells Fargo and Saturn and Union Bank of California, we better start asking some questions here. The Arco Corporation, Pacific Bell are using the symbol of the red square. Joe Camel also using it. McDonald's are using it. Baccarat are using it very clearly here. The red square. As I said, the potentates are using it, but the presidents are often even seen sitting on the red square. I've seen many debates, so-called, where it looks like even an independent individual who we would want to vote for, but then the camera will pull back and sure enough there they are sitting on the red square time and time again. Not a blue square or a black square or floorboards, but no, a red carpet, a red square. The E is an extremely important letter that's used in a variety of different ways in advertising. In the program that we did called Divination and the Goddess Tradition, and also in the one called Astrotheology, we paid attention to the letter E because it represents the fifth element. In Greek, the fifth letter was called epsilon, but the word epsilon refers to quintessence, or the fifth element, which is a magical idea of transcending the four and going to the five. It's the essence of life, the elixir, the attainable state. Five is very important to occult magicians. And that's why we see the letter E always in some way striated or highlighted or with light on it, or twisted or contorted in some designer fashion, like we see with Dell and eForce and Intel and E-Trade. The E will be separated to one side or kept on its own, or in some other way highlighted. It's an occult methodology. Enron is the same idea, the capital E. And the red square. Of course, the pentagram itself, talking about fives, when you see the Macy's are using the pentagram, you see that Chrysler are using it, and many other corporations like Texaco. Please understand that this is an occult symbol from the ancient world that's being consciously used. Chanel number 5, not Chanel number 3.5 or 4 or 10, but Chanel number 5. And so many corporations and government agencies use the pentagram, like the US Pentagon, the Penthouse magazine are using it. Chrysler, the top of the Chrysler building, in fact, their penthouse literally is a gigantic 5-shaped room. OnStar are using it, Star Alliance, Prodigy. Here in almost a magical pose stand the founders of Tsarion Corporation. They're all dressed in blue, Masonic blue, and what do you know? They're standing inside a pentagon. We happen to know that many of the Silicon Valley companies and so-called independent corporations are not independent at all. A great deal of them are run from the Pentagon. We know that the so-called founders, these rags to riches stories were given, are simply unsustainable. Investigative journalists have found out. And of course, it's a no-brainer to understand that those people who are meant to found their organizations, the Larry Ellisons of the world and the Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, these people only own 2.5, 2.3% of their companies. I think Bill Gates is obviously one of the largest, but the guy doesn't own more than 5% of his own company. Well, who does? Who pays for these companies to exist? And where does their money come from? And what's their agenda? Who are these venture capitalists that serve the royal dynasties and elites of Europe? Do you think it's time to find out about all of this? Well, we can, starting with the symbols that they're using. Intel, using the symbol of the serpent around their little logo. And they have a thing now called the Pentium drive. Well, you realize that the word Pentium doesn't necessarily mean anything in English until you realize that it's the serpent or the serpentium. But even the word pentium means the fifth room or the place of the five. The place of the five, the fifth room. What are we referring to here? And here we have the logo with the door open, leading you into that place. Find out what the words and logos and symbols mean, and a whole other interesting story will unfold. We talked a little bit earlier at the beginning of this program about my personal motivations and how it is important to me to find grassroots solutions to the issues that are befuddling us in the world, and also that I am not coming from any partisan slant at all. But one of the other most important reasons, which has always irked me specifically and got me interested in this, was not just my interest in the occult world. I mean, I had no idea that the work that I was doing in the metaphysical tradition and that the occult world, and then I had over here this kind of interest in subliminal art. I had no idea in the wide world that these two things were going to eventually come together. And that I would find that there's a whole world of occultism involved in the corporate world. It was kind of by chance that that happened to me, that these two worlds would become fused. But I paid a lot of attention to it. I was able to make that leap and think, yes, what I'm seeing is true, and it's not just a matter of skulls and ice cubes. There's something else going on here, a deeper level of, a deeper substratum of important symbols and iconography that's being used. But again, on a more human level, what happened was that I saw how animals, for instance, were being denigrated in advertising. And I found that reprehensible, that whole cult of using the animal symbolism. And also how children were being thought of as nothing but fashion accessories. I found personally extremely reprehensible, to say the least, the human network. I also found the denigration of the female to be reprehensible. Here's a perfect example of the headless woman. 7 meetings, 7 locations, 6 cabs. Fortunately, your evening is free. Here another lady or woman who's got a lot of head problems. And you find that the corporation is CTX, and the logo is down near her vaginal area. CTX is the Latin for cetus, or it's a phoneme. CTS, CTC, or CTX means actually something in the languages of the ancient world. Cetus is the vagina. The idea that the woman is in a supine, incapacitated position is often shown in advertisements as being something chic and stylish. That there's something limp and indefinite about femininity. We're being sold an idea of femininity that is very weak and passive and supine. Or we're just being sold the vamp, the pure and simple idea of the witch. Here we have the Salem Corporation, and of course the tie-in, what a genius. The idea is the Salem relates to the Salem witch trials. So their corporations involve themselves here not only in headless women, but if you observe the hands on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see that it's the talons, the predatory female, is being sold to us here. Then we have the whole question of gender, which itself opens the floodgates to all kinds of manipulation and the ambivalence that human beings have on a deep subconscious level about the question of gender. We talked in the Divination and the Goddess presentation in that DVD about the whole idea of the beauty of androgyny and how the goal of all religion, the goal of all magic, the goal of all theology and yoga and ritual originally had a purpose. Not the purpose that's being told to us from the pulpits today, of course, but the original idea was androgyny, a concept of bi-unity, bi-unification of the masculine and the feminine, the light and the dark, the up and the down. And so the quest for that can be subverted. Here we have Sex, Fifth Avenue. They're relying very strongly on the idea of the hermaphrodite, the androgyne. It's a very powerful motif to the subconscious mind of the two beings becoming one. Of course, in our world, there's nothing but gender dichotomy, the splitting of gender. So you're either what society is doing is reinforcing every day the gender split, the gender dichotomy. But they're selling to us in surrogate at high expense the opposite, the illusion, the fallacy that they will not educate us in officially, but they'll sell to us in some surrogate means. When you see the goddess figure, the female figure, surrounded by balloons, it's a very ancient motif, this, and it has a very deep impact on the human mind. The female represents the ovum, or the womb, and the ova are little round cups. The ovum are the wafers. And the balloons with their thread represent the sperm. That's why we used to let fireworks and balloons off into the night sky, because they literally represented the male energy going up to impregnate the night sky, the body of the night sky. So in this simple logo, where they even have, they're relying so much on the power of the logo that you can hardly see the writing. You can hardly see that it's Christian Dior, because again, they're scaling down the language, the letters, because that refers only to the conscious mind. But the image has been chosen selectively, very carefully, to represent the act of conception. And the female ova surrounded by lots and lots and lots of the sperm. Our unconscious picks up on that, finds it very, very alluring image. We looked earlier at Chanel and the idea of the shape of the vagina and the phallic bottles and the fact that the channel, and then the word for men is positioned in a way that indicates that this is for men. Here again, Chanel and another one show near the model her sexual organs. They have their logo, the double C. And double C, by the way, is 33. There's the 33rd degree again. C as a letter is 3 in numerology. And the limp, passive, demure female is a very important motif. Here again, for the camera, the model is making the symbol of the womb with her hands. She's also positioning the product near the womb area. Here we have the symbol for the yoni. The downward pointing triangle in a Star of David represents the female yoni, the female aspect. On the right we see the ovum and the phallic again, in Estee Lauder. The ovum and the phallic idea. Extremely entrancing to the mind. Here in Bacardi, they have the same idea, only the man is this time inside the ovum. The O for Bacardi, and the phallic bottle. Here's a corporation that even are calling themselves the ovum. Here for Washington apples, the idea of the forbidden fruit and the connection to the female. Here you have the apple, and of course it shows the female torso from behind. The whole concept of Eve. Don't just eat these apples, but we want to have connotations of temptation and evil and loss of paradise and heaven, all the things that come out of the religious connotation. Now, the farmer or the company that wanted to sell their apples in a million years couldn't have come up with an idea like that. But the advertiser to whom they went and paid lots of money, they could, because they have whole libraries at their disposal. And they've made a study of the human mind. They understand the difference between the sacred and profane. They know about the cleavance within the unconscious of the human being. Here's a watch company called the Christ. A spirit are telling you, I am spirit. The female motif again. And the 3, the E is not only highlighted, but the E is divided into 3 levels there, which might be a reference to Freemasonry. Here the male is shown with a halo. He's in heaven. We talked about the idea of the heavenly female, Nuth, in Divination of the Goddess, that one of the most primordial of all images is the idea of the sky goddess Nuth, that later became Isis, Sophia, and then finally becomes Mary, the Madonna. This symbol for Kenzo, literally showing the goddess with the lily of Mary, Mother Mary's lily, the Vesica Pisces from sacred geometry, the crescent moon, and the intersection of her womb area. What do we find in the tarot cards? Exactly the same idea. Somebody's been doing their homework here. We find the female, the empowered priestess with her crescent moon and her flowers. Exactly the same religious motif that you find in this corporate logo. Only one is selling you empowerment and enlightenment, and the other is selling you quite the opposite. And the idea of yoga being sold to us in regard to something temporal, something material. There's a crossover at work, a negative crossover. Here we have the sacred and profane idea of the religious poses and the religious iconography that's being denigrated. Here the female on the left is sitting in a yoga pose with her hands in prayer. But of course we know it's selling some jeans or something. On the right, the same idea. Look at the motif, the flagrant abuse of sacred symbolism. Here again, not only is the perspective contorted, but we have the religious symbol evoked here. The powerful male archetype, the phallic buildings in the background, but the perspective is twisted in more ways than one. Here the male figure, which is of course the anima, if you take it to the archetypal level, the animus, the male father, all father with the wings in the sky, angel's wings. Here again you have two symbols of sacredness. The female model on the left is made to make the pose of the Egyptian symbol of enlightenment. And on the right we have the Christian hands position to sell jewelry. A couple more headless women for you there. These ones are also shown with the arms crossed across the breast. Of course, one of the secondary meanings of the hands in that position does represent death. Oh, you'll see the mummies lying in a recumbent position like that in Egypt. It's not only a symbol of death, but you often see that. So here, when the female is shown in that form, it's also a morbid type of image of the death, that the female in a pose of death is acceptable. Another important point to notice is the design of certain franchises like Taco Bell and McDonald's, how often they are designed on the basis of churches, especially in the American context. You don't have the luxury of having the beautiful churches and cathedrals that you do in Europe, because then perhaps it would be more noticed. But here, when you go into these franchises, if you look very carefully, the design of the franchises, like Ringer Hut and these groups, have been designed based on temples and cathedrals and churches, scaled down, of course, and a little bit more subliminally. Taco Bell is based on the old Mexican idea of the chapel. But Pizza Hut and Taco Bell, Jack in the Box, KFC, Church's Chicken. We even have a franchise called Church's Chicken. I've even seen some where they have a literal portico where you go inside just like a church, and they have stained glass windows on the side, and they have this little sort of portico. You go in through one set of doors and then there's another set of doors. Why would you do that? Oh, well, because you see, we're all devoid and raped of spirituality. We're no longer getting sustenance from on high, but we can have our burgers and our fast food. That's going to give us our sustenance and our food. But it's a religious act. It's not going to work. It's not going to attract you unless your mind has been confused and contorted into relating two very dissimilar things together. That now your lower appetites and lower drives, that's where they're going to allow you in this world to get your sustenance from. And of course it works, because for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, our forebears who went into churches knew all about the awe. They had the understanding of the power and the glory from on high, and these vast cathedrals and the power that our ancients felt that's still in our racial memory. And also there's a study of the positioning of these franchises in the streets, in the cityscapes. They're not just put anywhere. It happens that our squares in which we live, in America especially, there's a block system operating civically. Well, it's known that the square is the shape that encloses the least amount of area for the most amount of line, and the circle encloses the most amount of area for the least amount of line. That's why they're diametrically opposite. And the whole idea of the alchemists and the squaring of the circle, and that whole irrational concept of how you might do that, is a secret, an occult secret. But if we build our cities and our houses in squares and in blocks, then just the very act of walking, the very act of living in that type of escape is a wastage concept. It's wasting energy, and we don't know that consciously, but subconsciously our spirit finds it very, very inhibiting. Because in ancient days we used to live in matriarchies, and the idea was to have a village that was in a circular form. So when we are in the very act of living in the cities, we're feeling always a sense that we're burning off more energy, psychically and biologically and physically, than is needed. So what would happen? You're going to feel always unfulfilled. There'll be a subconscious feeling of unfulfillment just in the very act of living and driving and walking around these unsustainable city blocks. Well, they've got a plan for that. these franchises that are designed often like churches are positioned at certain places strategically. McDonald's especially have gone to great lengths to do this. They are known to always have their franchises after a traffic light, and usually on the right-hand side, so that you got plenty of time at a red light to sit there and feel all hungry, so that just after the light you'll be likely to pull in. And they've fought for this kind of positioning. Now you and your shop have no chance in the wide world of ever getting that kind of privilege, but these franchises will, because it's more than just selling burgers that's involved here. And so the positioning of these church-like buildings replicates the old idea of city design in which the church was placed there, and that's where you went for your spiritual sustenance. So today we feel voided in an energy way, and we go to these new churches, these new franchises. Cosmetic companies have even been employed by some of them to create scents of chicken and French fries that you can smell 2 blocks away. But isn't it interesting, when you go inside you don't smell anything? Well, Chanel Corporation are producing these scents artificially that they will be let loose, broadcast over the whole area to seduce you to come in there. And then people, good, ordinary, decent people, are wondering why they've got obesity problems and eating disorders, and they can't seem to stop it and break the addiction, and are in complete, utter mania in their minds about feeling that they're weak and they're impotent and there's something wrong with them because they can't break the habit. My goodness, if you realize the barrage of subliminal attack that's going on, these individuals, you won't be blaming yourself. Stop sitting at home, chewing your nails, thinking there's something wrong with you. The days and nights and the horror that goes into all of that, thinking you're weak. No, find out the weapons that your enemy is using first before you go down that road and destroy yourself thinking that there's something wrong with you. There's somebody shooting in your direction. There's powers at work that are taking away your life force and want you to be in a miasma of confusion, what Durkheim called the anomie. But we find that it even gets worse than that. Jack in the Box, that's an American fast food corporation. That name has always interested me, why they would choose that, because it's patently Masonic, and it refers to the pillars of the Temple of Solomon, which are sacred to all Freemasons. But these pillars are called in the Bible Jachin and Boaz, which is where the term comes from. It also has sexual connotations because Jachin literally meant God makes him firm. That's what the word Jachin in Hebrew in the Bible means. Jachin, God makes him firm. And Boaz meant eagerness and strength. Boaz means eagerness and strength. And what do you think that means? Now, Jack is also short for ejaculation. Box is a euphemism for the female vagina, and always has been, going back to the original box of the Ark of the Covenant. That is an actual fact. The word box has always been used as a symbol for the female opening. And Jack is obviously short for ejaculation. So just remember when you're eating there what the word means. This is also where J and B whiskey comes from, Jachin and Boaz, as well as black and white whiskey. A lot of the whiskey corporations, I know this coming out of Ireland, Bushmills and all of that culture of drinking booze. Some of the first things I ever started to study was Hennessy and Bushmills and the logos that were on bottles of distilled alcohol and whatnot. As slowly one gets involved in this, you start to see how this Masonic symbolism enters into it. And the black and the white, always the pillars of the Temple of Solomon were shown as black and white. Take out the second card of the tarot and look at the high priestess, and you'll see that the pillars of the Temple of Solomon are black and white. And they're called Jachin and Boaz, J and B. The whiskey companies and distilleries are often Masonic controlled. Now, we've been putting a lot of emphasis on symbolism, on the pyramid and the dove and the sun and the circle and the Malta cross and Masonic symbols as well. And we've touched a little bit about the power of astrology and how it's astrological motifs. But we also mustn't forget words themselves. Certain letters have a very powerful effect on the unconscious mind. The letter A, of course, because it represents beginnings and the first and the best. But the most important letter to be aware of, the one that has the deepest effect on the unconscious mind, is the letter S and the sound of S. Sound for sex and success and seduction. This S sound, for some reason, works wonders with the unconscious mind. But other letters too, like the letter Q. Here we have a company that knows this, Avon. Not only do they use the A and the V and the O and the N, these are powerful letters, but their company, their product is the S, triple S. That serpentine shape is very successful for selling things. The car company Sentra, another word that doesn't mean anything in English, because one of the devices that these advertisers use is to compact words together. It's what's called composite terms. Yes, the word Sentra doesn't mean anything in English, but it contains many words that do, like centaur, center, and centaur, and enter. Enter being, of course, a sexual motif, and scent, and serpent, and Ra. Centra, the center of Ra. Ra, of course, is the sun. So centra means the center of the sun. But it also says center and scent. It's a term that is connotative rather than denotative. A centron is a goat in Greek, by the way. Same thing with Lexus, a word that doesn't mean anything in English. And if you spell it backwards, it means, it spells succel. And there's that strong S sound again. But succel encompasses the word success, sex, sell, and lux. And lux is the word in Latin for light. So 4 words there are used. But then, of course, if you use succel, it was a little bit obvious. So the designer had the bright idea of turning it round. And it became Lexus. And their logo is the L, but it's also the corner of a pyramid. If you take the circle off of it, of course, and extend the lines, you'll find that it makes the Illuminati pyramid. Sprite goes with the same idea, because the sprite is very close to the word spirit. So when you see all those wonderful beach advertisements where the kids are knocking back the Sprite and the light is shining everywhere, the whole idea being communicated to you from a subliminal point of view is that they're drinking spirit. Look, they're drinking the life force. They're drinking pure light. Get out there and get some. And that serpentine shape we see on so many areas, in so many corporate logos. But guess where that comes from? Now, in an old out-of-print book called The Celestial Ship of the North, written by the occult scholar Valentia Stratton, says that the word SUS, like we see in Isuzu, for instance, this Japanese company Isuzu, the word SUS, or sun, because that's what it really meant, the sun behind the sun, was once anciently written SUS, or the other S would be facing like a mirror. Okay, that was actually written in occultism like that. The letter reversed is a symbol of the serpent force or super solar manifestation. The SUS denotes involution and evolution, the descent of the serpent force into matter and the return upward through evolution. The serpent solar disk is often seen on Egyptian monuments like an SOZ or SOS. Letters of the ancient alphabet were keys unlocking the originating causation in the manifestation of all things. The SS or ZZ, symbolically used, are interchangeable. Often the SS on sigils and talismans are suggestive of the serpentine evil influence that denotes a sign of black magic upon others. So I don't mean run out and hack the logo off your Isuzu. I don't mean do that at all. I'm talking about intellectual understanding of where these terms come from, so that your next drive down the main street is going to be an educated one, where you're going to understand that red is the color that stimulates men, and green and yellow stimulate women. That these logos represent something in the ancient languages of the ancient world. Just because we don't know about it and because we're not told about it doesn't mean that it's not the case. X as a letter is very, very powerful because, for one reason, it represents the female chromosome X. So anytime you see the X on anything, it feminizes it. So here you have the Tangri, gin or whatever it is, you have the phallic bottle, but it's in the X. That's a sexual connotation right there. Here you have the model and XOXO, the female chromosome, and the O is the ovum. So there's a very, very feminine image here of the ovum, symbol of the O, and the X of the X chromosome, and the female model, because there she is. There is the X chromosome. You'll see that on movies, all sorts of designs out there. We understand that there's an ideogram and a phonogram. That's right. The ancient Egyptians would draw a little picture. That's an ideogram, a picture. But we don't know how to pronounce the letter. Then comes the phonogram, which is the sound of the word A. So you can draw the letter A. That's the ideogram. It's a picture of the letter A. But the sound, the phonogram, is A, that sound. We've been talking about that there's a liminal and subliminal usage of these things. There's what you see with your eye and what you're allowed to see, and then there's that part that's purposely kept in shadow, that's purposely kept in the darkness. Now, as part of this process, when it especially comes to words, we have 3 levels that we need to be aware of. We have the word, which is always recognizable by the conscious mind. If you say the word magnum, that's understandable. You understand what that word means. A word, as we know, is broken down into what we call syllables. That's the next level of contraction. Now, a syllable is usually not pronounceable, but it certainly is recognizable. When you see a syllable, you can probably tell. Mag. Oh, I think mag might be part of magnum. But then you shrink it down even further in linguistics, and you have what is called the phoneme. And the phoneme is the most contracted form of a word. And usually by the time you've got to the phoneme, it is not possible to tell from what word or what term is being related to. Now, designers and advertisers make great use of these phonemes, and they're a whole study in themselves. You'll often see them, for instance, on cars. EV for evil, and XL for extra large and excellent, and LX for lux, and X, and XI, and XE. X, XI, and XE are Greek. The answer to that one comes from Greek. They're feminine. We talked about the X being feminine. That's right, because in Greek, the word she, when you said she, it was spelt XI, and the X was pronounced SH. Okay? So it's XE, she, or XE, or just the letter X. So every time you see this car, XI or XE, just realize it's feminizing the car, which of course will attract men. And we always talk about our boats and our ships and our yachts and our cars as she. XS, literally meaning excess, excessive. We always want to be in excess. GL for girl. NX is nix for night, for the dark. DL for deluxe and devil. DX is slang for the male phallic, the member. DK is the same. ST for status. RS is the royal sign. RS was the old symbol for the royals. And RX also the same, the Rosicrucians, or the RX is the old symbol for Rex, the king, Roy, the regent. And we have many triad terms. Our world is filled with triad letters like MTV and FOX and CBC and CNN. We talked about the 3 in Masonic and how important the triad is. And CETUS and CX and class, CLS for class, and STS for status, and so on. A whole study in itself. Think I'm making it up? They're happy to tell you themselves. Here's the Cadillac status, but the phoneme that they're using, as you can see at the bottom, is STS. But the car is called the status, and the phoneme is STS for Cadillac. The use of phonemes is betrayed in this advertisement. Now, we have heard the term PC being flouted a lot. Maybe it's coincidence, but it just turns out that PC has a very sexual connotation and also comes out of the ancient world. P is the Latin for phallus. Okay, so P stands for phallus. And the C for cetus, which is the female vagina. PC literally represents the coming together of the male and the female. But that's where we also get city hall from. Hallus, or the phallus, was the hall, the hallway. And the city, which was always usually designed in a circle, represented the womb of the mother. You're building the city as the earth mother, protecting all of her children, all of her little ova, all of her little beings, all encompassed in her arms of the city. And in the city is the standing stone, the phallic, the tower, the clock tower. This whole idea of the phallic and the circle. You see fountains with the, obelisk in the middle or the water shooting out of it. All over the cities you'll see the same idea. But we never think what it actually means. Another device they use is simply turning things backwards. We have heard of Fila Corporation, of course. But Fila spelled backwards is Aleph. And that one will be recognized by anybody who studied occultism or anyone who studied the Hebrew language, because Aleph actually means something. Aleph, or Aleph, means life. It's the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. they pronounced their letter A, Aleph, and it means breath, or life force, or living. So what do you think it means then when you take the word for life and you reverse it? What does it mean then? So the next time you see these kids wearing these Fila t-shirts walking around like they're living death, perhaps there's a connection, perhaps there's a reason. They're literally wearing the symbol of death right across their chest. Aleph also is Aliv. The company Aliv is Aliv. Aliv comes from the same word root as the Hebrew Aleph. We find that AIDS as a word has an ancient ancestry. It comes from Hades, or Hades. Hades was the original god of the underworld, the god of death and mortality. And he was originally known in Greek and Latin as Aides, A-I-D-E-S. But the Anglo-Saxons always have the H sound, so it became Hades or Hades. The ATM comes from Atma, the god of light, the soul. AZT, as we saw in Divination of the Goddess, refers to Azoth. Azoth was the mercurial elixir of life, that which restored you, and that's what was if you imbibed it, it was like the Holy Grail. It gave you the secret of life. How interesting that we should find AIDS patients being given AZT in order to bring them back to life. HIV, those letters should be instantly recognizable to anyone in the Hebrew tradition who studied occultism, because they're literally the letters of God. They're 3 of the 4 of the most sacred letters that the world you could possibly think of. The earliest name of God is IHVH, Yahovah. And then we find that HIV comes from that. VH1, also those letters come from the same idea of God. NEC, the corporation, NEC, that actually is from necro, or necrophiliac, which means death. There it is, the IHVH, read backwards. They read from right to left. In Hebrew, the sacred letters of God is IHV. ADM from Arthur Daniel Midland Corporation, but ADM was an old logo used many thousands of years ago to represent the seed of David, Adam, David, and Messiah. AT&T, that's right out of Egyptology. It comes from the Atet, the way they even shaped their E, their and, makes it look like an E. Well, the Atet was the boat that Horus, the Sun King, used to sail across the sky in. It was called the Atet boat. And from that boat, he would communicate to all the dead souls. NFL, National Football League, is the code word or the phoneme of Nephilim, which actually means the fallen angels. Arco from Archon. CRX, like the Honda CRX, is a very old logo, just like that, CRX, from Christian Rosenkrantz, who was the founder of the Rosicrucians, a secret order. And DVD, which you find on cigarettes, and all sorts of logos, you'll see the D, the V, the D, actually comes from David, the seed of David. And there it is, the Atet boat that Horus traveled the skies on. Evian is an anagram of the word naive, as is Nivea. And Evian is water, and Nivea is cream, the idea of innocence, water being connected to youth and innocence. So the words are anagrams. Avida Corporation. Vida is the Indian word for knowledge. Put an A on the front of it, just like our language in English, and it means the opposite of. So Avida means ignorance. Saint Stan's is a beer. If you say the word to yourself very quickly, Saint Stan, Saint Stan, Saint Stan, Saint Stan, repeat it over and over again, it actually turns out to be the word Satan. Advil, like the Cadillac DeVille, just means the devil. Advil, the devil. Taifuti. Typhon was one of the most ancient names for the satanic principle. And as we said, Aliv comes from the Hebrew alive. They're literally telling you, you got a headache, you're sick, take this, it represents the life force. Here's Pepsi and their cans. If you put one can on top of the other, you'll find that it makes the term sex, S-E-X. If this picture is not clear enough for you to see it, just go into the local shop and do an experiment and you'll see how subliminally these people work. And the phallic and the DK, representing the slang for the male member. And this company's even putting one there for you to make the connection with the sunflower. We saw earlier on how common it is for the sun to be used to hypnotize and attract the unconscious mind. Calvin Klein is CK, that's sick. The sexual motifs are often shown very subliminally. Here you see a drawing for a corporate company, and the position of the hand, the model that's been painted is facing downwards towards the genitalia. Also notice his tie, the red tie, how it is subliminally like a little devil's head with two horns. Here we have Knob Creek alcohol. The term knob, of course, and creek are the male and the female genitalia. And the little logo is, honey, your ex-wife is at the front door. She's holding a bottle of Knob Creek. Well, tell her I still love her. Now this is really loaded. First of all, we've got infidelity. But here we also have the idea that because she's holding a bottle of alcohol, that this drunken husband of hers is now going to want to go back to her. So it's preposterous symbolism here, but of course this is the level that these individuals are on and would love us to be dragged to. Your ex-wife, what does that imply? Failed marriages. I love her because she's holding the bottle. I don't love you now because she's got what I want. She's bringing the right product to me, and my emotions are entirely involved in that. I don't love the person. That was why the marriage got divorced. But guess what? She comes back with a bottle of Knob Creek. We're in business. This kind of subliminal stuff is used here in Grand Mariner. Only this time there's taboo sexuality involved. Menage a trois. You see here that the couple on the right, the male and the female, are connected. They're together. And the third female on the left has come in. Her hands represent the praying mantis. But it's also a very supine and submissive position that she's in. It's also preposterous. Nobody in their wildest imagination would ever sit like that. But that's, we're in the realm of advertising here. We're in the world of insanity. So here we have the idea, and the female on the right. We also have the Gemini twinning idea. But the female on the right is inviting. The male is just doing the normal interaction bit, but the female on the right is sort of enticing. And we understand that there's a possibility of a partnership here, and you'll see there's something very strange is happening on the far right with the hand positions. You'll notice that on the far right there, the female is been told to make the vesica symbol, the female opening, to the phallic finger of her boyfriend. So there's a lot happening in these advertisements, and as the researchers and the thinkers were saying earlier on, as we saw in this program, that in a millisecond, you may just go like this and say, oh, look, it doesn't affect me. But in a millisecond, all of its erotic and perverse content is flooding into your mind. Your unconscious doesn't move in time. It doesn't require time. We know that from our dreams, that it takes a split second and we can live in age. So the permissiveness is very attractive, and so it should be. But then if we want to be permissive, we should be able to do that on our own behalf. We shouldn't need Grand Mariner to tell us how to do it. And also there's other subliminal motifs been spray painted and used in the design. Like in the middle of the shirt we have some satanic demonic faces and so on. Here the symbol idea of you can't turn over too many rocks. And the rock being, of course, the representation of the testicles and the male genitalia. This one hardly needs any commentary at all. And it's coming from the FCUK company. That, of course, is an anagram, is very clearly what that represents. And if this sells people clothes, no more need to be said. Here's a candies.com where you see the phallic idea and the raping of the female. Here, not only you have headless women, but women with the surrogate phallic. The genitalia, the Coca-Cola becomes the surrogate phallic, because the idea being that all women have penis envy and whatnot. Now, the most interesting thing is that the word Coke has antiquity as well, by the way. C-O-K-E, or K-O-K-E, or K-U-K, which has also known to be the derogatory slang word for the male phallus. Right? C-O-C-K represents the male phallic. That's an old word coming out of Egypt. It meant the male genitalia. So coke represented the old Egyptian word for the male genitalia. And it was spelled K-U-K as well as C-O-K. Perhaps that's why the Coca-Cola company called their product the real thing. And here in the designer ad, the very positioning of the can is very suggestive. One of the most important symbols that is used is the eye, because it also represents not only the eye but the female opening. On the right you have the Toyota symbol that encompasses the 3 circles or orbits of celestial motion. In astrotheology we talked about an essential, you couldn't even have astrology or astronomy without 3 principal orbital movements. That of the Earth on its own orbit, that of the Earth moving round the Sun, and then the wobble of the Earth, which makes a third spiral. And these 3 spirals that were shown in motifs on church windows and church doors is a very well-known symbol called the Triskelion, or the Triskelius. And Toyota are playing on that. They changed their logo from the hard T that it used to be, and somebody came up with the 3 circles. Now the 3 circles, if you notice them very clearly, one is very sharp, and one is a little bit more elliptical. The very sharp ellipse is known to be the ellipse of Mars. The planet Mars moves on a very, very sharp ellipse. Venus moves on a very graceful one. And Venus has always been considered very graceful. So the 2 ellipses that they even have there also even represent the male and female gender, the coming together of the masculine and the feminine. Mercury was known as the god who traveled the fastest. That's why he was always shown with the winged feet. How did the ancients know that Mercury was the god of speed, that he should have the winged feet? And how would they know that Mercury is in fact the planet that is closest to the Sun and has the fastest orbit? It also moves in 88 days around the Sun. So 88 is how many keys you have on a piano. And we have an Oldsmobile 88. You think of all the numbers in the world, why are they calling it 88? Because they know what you don't know, that this car is under Mercury, like the Acura is under Mercury. The Oldsmobile 88, because it takes 88 days for the planet Mercury. And of course we have the Mercury News and the Mercury Herald, and the Mercury symbol is used an awful lot. They said that the planet Uranus was the most off its orbit. It lays pretty much on its side. So it was the most erratic, which is why Uranus and Aquarius became the star signs of eccentricity. But of course, how would the ancients know all of that? And the planet Saturn being very large, and also moving on a bizarre orbit with these clouds of gas and the mysterious covering that it had. This also gives a rise to some of the symbolism involved with the planets. The little symbol above the Toyota symbol there, and below the MasterCard logo, is the symbol for infinity, but that is a very well-known symbol in occultism. That is the symbol associated with the cloven hoof of the devil. It's a witch's symbol, and that symbol used to represent the mark of the footprint of the devil. So what's it doing on a car company? Above it we see the MasterCard logo, and the MasterCard logo shows also the Vesica Pisces, the coming together of 2 circles. But the levels of the Vesica in the middle, the striations, there are 13. There's 13 little levels in the middle there. 13 is an Illuminati number from the pyramid, having 13 levels. Back to words again, and we find that this word taste is used an awful lot. Tasting smoother, and the sexual connotation of tasting smoother, burning slower, lasting longer. These are sexual innuendos. But the word taste is also very important. Here we have it again. In the word, we have Kent. And Kent is a take on the word. There's the repositioning or the transposition of letters. Kent is the slang word for the female opening, C-U-N-T. But if you just change the terminology. And we have many words that imply the sexual. Coit, Kent, as we said. Salem, which is males, it's an anagram for the word male. Camel, which is often made to look like carnal. Marlboro we'll come to in a minute. Virginia Slims, the same idea there that smoking the cigarette will make you a virgin and slim, some feet indeed. Jack in the Box we've already talked about. Coke being the male phallus. Coors is the Egyptian word for the testicles. Okay, that word comes from somewhere. I don't care if it's the name of the company, the name of the family, or what. Designers just don't use family names unless there's a need for that. And that word has an origin. Fax, which is to simulate, again, the slang word for copulation. Fox, the same thing. Etam, which is a female lingerie company, but that actually is an anagram for the word mate. In fact, it spells the word mate backwards. So, of course, the women who are buying the lingerie and walking home, on the bag it has the word Etam. But as you're walking past the windows, window shopping, now you'll see the reflection of the word mate. So it's subliminally affecting you. Oil of Ulay and Lays, I mean, it's pretty obvious what that all implies. Now, this word taste. Taste is a transposition of the word testicles, the testes. This is how it's picked up in the subconscious mind, and that's how it's used. So when it says taste the difference, it's all a matter of taste. And we know that the idea of testicles is very much connected to libido and power and virility. In fact, that's where the word testament comes from. In the old days, the prophets would actually hold their testicles when they would say that they swear. Check into Hebrew philosophy and you'll know this, that the holding of the male testicles when you're swearing an oath. And the testament comes from the testicles. So when you read in corporate ads, it's all a matter of taste. Just realize what they're telling you there. Searching for that longer lasting taste. And logos like, corporate blurbs like, we'll have you in and out so fast that you can get on with the thing you call your life. Not only is that patently sexual, but it's patently condescending. This is actually an advertisement so that you can get on with that thing you call your life. Not that we call your life, but that you think you call your life. And then we have the very famous and well-used logo, or excuse me, the blurb, come to the Marlboro country. Marlboro is a huge corporation, very powerful. Many people are against it. Many people are suspecting that it's degrading. But not too many people understand exactly why it is degrading. We read, come to the Marlboro country. All you got to do is realize that the word come represents the sexual act, and that country is a play on words, especially two words. If you drop the O, you'll see what they're really talking about. Come to the Marlboro cunt, try. So the next time you see the libidinous male on his horse with his lassoing in and corralling a bunch of cows, and the logo says, come over here to the Marlboro cunt try, perhaps you'll understand why this thing is so reprehensible. But it's very impactful to the male psyche, to the sick and distorted male psyche. The Volvo symbol, as we said, not only represents the Volvo, the vulva, the generative complex of the female, which all men, of course, want to be very much involved with. But the logo itself is Mars, the symbol of Mars astrologically, the symbol of the sun, and the symbol of Saturn. That Volvo logo across it that makes it look like the rings of Saturn. So this designer got 3 in 1. There it is, the symbol of Mars, just in case anybody, this is completely new to you. The symbol of Mars, the ruler of Aries. There it is again. In proximity to the female. At the phallic, you have the female, and then you have the Mars symbol of the phallic. There it is again. The idea of male virility, even on somebody that doesn't have any. Now, we find this term Pepsi or Peppa or Pepsid or Peppy Jeans and Dr. Pepper and Sergeant Pepper used quite a lot in different corporations. Where does it come from? Well, Pepsa or Pepsi, literally almost without changing in the spelling at all, was the old Egyptian god of the night, of darkness, of evil, and of temptation. The mothers in those days used to scare their children by saying, if you don't do your homework or not be good, Peppa will get you. Because Pepsa was the absolute devil in Egyptian mythology. So just remember who Dr. Pepper and Sergeant Pepper really are. We have the 7-Up. Well, that's a reference to not only the 7 chakras in the spiritual context, but the 7-Up are the 7 stars of Ursa Major, which were sacred to all people in the ancient world. We saw the California flag represents that in a cryptic way, and the idea of the 7-Up relating to the 7 lights of the northern sky. 7-11, that relates to the proportions of the pyramid at Giza. I don't want to elaborate upon this, it's extremely sacred, but the idea of the pyramid is based on the proportion 7 to 11. I mean, these stores are not open from 7 to 11, so what's the point? But this is well known to the Illuminati and the Freemasons to be a very, very sacred harmonic. Union 76, We'll come to that in a minute, but they're using the 76 there. And chevron, chèvre, and Chevrolet. First of all, chèvre is French for goat. So that's Capricornian symbolism, but it also might be satanic symbolism. And on represents the light. So chevron literally means the light in the goat, or the sun in Capricorn. It's astrological. Chevrolet is the relay, or the orbit around the goat. Again, astrological. Union 76 is, of course, a commemoration of 1776, when the sun was in Cancer and the Union of America was born. However, there's a Masonic undertone to this. If we take the number 76, we'll find that 7, just take 7. But think in terms now of the clock, because Masons are very fascinated with the idea of time and with clocks in general, and zodiacs. Well, 7 o'clock is 660, is it not? Another way of expressing 7 o'clock, right? 6:50, 6:55, 6:59, 6:60 is in fact 7 o'clock. And then you take the 6 of 76 and you have 666. So also Union 76 used the large orange ball in this, and it's rotating at the top of a pole. Well, I mean, it's pretty basic to understand what is the great orange ball that rotates up in the sky. It's the sun that was in Cancer in 1776 when the Union was born. It's all astrology, even though it's on a gas company. Many, many terms, especially on cars, refer to cosmological or stellar events. We saw the Mini is Gemini and Capricorn is Capri. We found out that there's cars called Zodiac. The Subaru also uses the stars. Chrysler used the 5-pointed star. Mercury is the planet Mercury. Geo represents the Earth. Saturn is obvious. Nissan representing the first month of the astrological year. Mazda meaning the exact same thing. Datsun, Acura. Orion is the constellation in Taurus. Escort, Ford Escort. In ancient days, the planets that moved against the background of the night sky were called the escorts. You had the sun and the moon, who were considered the royal luminaries. And then the planets that moved with them were called the escorts. It's an astrological term. And Astra, and Lumina, and Infinity. Pulsar. Or we have Aerostar, and Del Sol, and North Star, like the Cadillac North Star. And Corona, and Sunny, and Eclipse. We don't have time to analyze each one in great detail, but believe me, there's something going on here. If these car companies are thinking so much on the heavens and the stars, we have to realize there's a reason. And they understand about our racial memory. They've studied our phylogenetic reservoir and understand how impactful it is, because once upon a time we worshipped the stars. They were the gods of all mankind. We talked earlier about the meaning of Hollywood, but even touchstone is a term from alchemy. Disney Corporation are now called the Touchstone Corporation. A touchstone was an alchemical motif of the sacred philosopher's stone. Tri-star is literally 3 stars. Well, 3 stars is trickster. Coming out of Scandinavian mythology, the 3 pentagrams of the 3 stars is tri-star. And what do we see as the tri-star logo? Is the white horse, the white unicorn with the sun blazing on his back, rising out of the clouds, the Cancerian symbol. Now to conclude, and to show you, give you another last example of just how sophisticated this kind of symbolic action is, we need to look back at Leo. We were looking earlier at the sign of Leo and a few of its connotations that might be used in advertising and in symbolism. And again, I emphasize that these are symbols that you can also use. This is a study that has a very proactive and positive side as well. We've been looking at more of the controversial aspects of it through this program because there's a pestilence in our midst, a poison, a veritable poison that we need to be rid of. But that doesn't mean that the use of symbols should stop, or that there's something inherently negative with symbolism. Now when we looked at Leo, we saw that the card in the tarot deck that represents Leo is the Strength card, number 8, and it shows a woman and a lion. And I made the point that the woman and the lion is, of course, a cryptic analog to the Sphinx. And the real Sphinx is in Egypt, 66 feet high. And why, we would ask, what is a Sphinx? And why would the Egyptians make that one of the symbols of their country? Well, the Egyptians were master astrologers. They were members of the stellar cult. And they had a different breakdown of the year than we do. Their year, for instance, the opening of the year, didn't begin in January 1st like ours, or not even on the December 21st, the winter solstice, like astrologers open their year. Their beginning of the year was in July 20th, between July 20th and July 25th, when the Nile waters were rising and fertility was coming to the land. But because the heavens have sort of moved during that period of time, July 5th wasn't in Cancer as it is now, it was actually in the sign of Virgo. And therefore, when the sun entered into the sign of Virgo, the Egyptian New Year began. And then the Egyptian priest would say, "Behold, the Son of God, the light of the world, is born of a virgin." And they would say that because it's known to astrologers. And you can check this out. Open any coffee table book on the subject of astrology, get on the web and look it up. And you'll find that the symbol of Virgo from time immemorial has been the young, youthful, virginal goddess or princess, the young woman, the virgin, Virgo. So when the sun would go in, the light would rise on the morning of Virgo, they would say the sun is born of a virgin, born again. And of course, if the birth of the year is in Virgo, then we have 12 months, 12 periods. And the sun will go full circle until it closes at the last sign, which of course is back almost full circle. And what is the sign before Virgo? If you look it up, you'll find that the sign before Virgo is Leo the lion. So to commemorate this phenomenon, this zodiacal phenomenon, and to also basically put up a neon sign to anyone who would come in later generations that we are astrologers, they built the Sphinx with the head of the woman and the body of a lion. And the gaze of the Sphinx used to actually look to the point on the horizon where the constellations of Leo and Virgo used to rise. So accurate were they. So we have this idea of the sun in Virgo. But today, we see the exact same thing being used in the corporate world. The famous symbol of Columbia Pictures is nothing less than the female virgin, the Virgo, and the sun behind her head. What you're seeing there, just in the same way as I mentioned earlier about Botticelli and his usage of the Venus and the shell. There's a certain kind of symbolic, subversive act of art going on before our eyes, and we don't know how to decode the symbolism. There you have an astrological symbol. And the tri-star symbol of the horse with the sun behind him, as I've just mentioned, represents the sign of Cancer, because in ages past, the sign of Cancer was not the crab. In fact, it got to be a crab because the original symbol was the scarabus beetle. Everyone knows the little beetle in Egypt that used to push the sun up, the ball of the sun. Well, that was the little beetle that pushed the sun up through the house of Cancer into Leo, its throne, so the sun could reach its home in Leo. So when you see the sun rising and the beetle pushing it, that's the sign of Cancer. But then the little beetle got transformed and degenerated, they corrupted the symbol and it became the crab. But contemporaneous to that, in more of the Anglo-Saxon countries, the sign of Cancer, the pale white moon, was symbolized by the pale white unicorn. That's also why you see in royal heraldry the ruddy lion and the pale white unicorn on either side of the heraldry to represent the royal houses of the sun and the moon. However unpleasant it is to hear, we need to realistically bear in mind that there can be no question of positive social change, no question of either national or global healing, until human beings, particularly those in the Western world, become lucidly cognizant and profoundly educated concerning the forces which impede positive, moral, psychological, and social progress. Such development will remain chronically arrested until we become re-educated as to the significance and power of symbols, not only as transcendent and abstract qualities or as mathematical ciphers, but as weapons in the hands of plutocratic elites with occult agendas, laboring to arrest the mental, emotional, and spiritual maturation of the underclasses whom they deem incapable of self-regulation. The alarming existential chaos which the young presently endure, though mostly deplored and ignored, serves as a direct indictment to the existence of the symbolic subversion I've been mentioning. The young are, by definition, closer to the creative force than the average adult. They are also more influenced by the drives of the limbic brain, and therefore respond with greater zeal to the erotic and even perverse symbolic messages adroitly designed to bypass their moral conscience and rational filter, and which infest their life and mind space. The creation of these ad-men, these Dr. Frankensteins, is not a happy or free man inhabiting a secure utopia, but an addicted victim suffering systemic impotency and malaise. He is as one under the witch doctor's hex, and as such, his once quiet and unmolested inner life is now a miasma of unfulfilled desires, surrogate pacifications, and misplaced allegiances. In losing a coherent sense of interior life, we have become a generation of decadent human beings who exist in order to have and not to be. Benefiting as they do from our ignorance as to the workings of social engineering, the leaders in office can hardly be expected to use their power and resources to effectively change the status quo. They are not inclined to demand or cause real change because they covet the view from teetering penthouses beyond the glass ceiling and the clamor of the audiences unaware of their own sovereign power to change the world around them. Fortunately, the times are changing and the masks are finally coming down, to the surprise of both protagonist and antagonist. It has already begun to dawn on a few that in their ardor for the thrill of climbing up high above others, and in their narcissistic zeal for reaching for the skies, they have, like Icarus, flown too close to the sun. So what a shock it will be for those who seek the prize of technical enlightenment and social utopia to realize that after all their sacrifice, they're doomed to fall back to earth with blazing wings. What cries will be heard from those whose vanity has propelled them so high above the world, when their exclusive realities come crashing gracelessly down. Already we're beginning to hear these cries, and as the new millennium advances, we're going to hear them more and more frequently, from the mouths of those finally recognizing that while they despotically ruled from their steely, cloud-crowned penthouses, they allowed their foundations to rot, weaken, and finally crumble away to nothing. We are approaching the days when many seemingly ancient myths are going to be reenacted. In fact, some of the greatest so-called myths are yet to occur. What a surprise it would be to find out that Lucifer's great fall from paradise was not an event of the past, but an event that is still to come.